Dynamic Women Talk Radio with Sandra Beck and Linda Kreter celebrate the thoughts and opinions of magnetic, spirited, and influential women. Each week, bold, brilliant women spark vigorous conversations on the complexities of life, love, and happiness. Now here are your hosts, Sandra Beck and Linda Kreter.
Hi, ladies, and welcome to Dynamic Women Talk Radio, where we pull together some of the most powerful and influential voices in women's issues today. And we're going to have a party of four. We're going to imagine that we're sitting around the table, maybe in a beautiful restaurant in New York or Toronto or Los Angeles or Washington, where our guests are from today, and we're going to have a glass of wine and we're going to talk about topics of the day. Now, today's topic is voice, and we hear a lot about women's voices. We hear them, develop. We hear them talk about finding their voices. And one of the things we're going to discuss today is how women's voices change over time. Now, I know personally, I was very, very outspoken in my 20s. I clammed up in my 20s and 30s, or my 30s and 40s, and then towards the later end of my 40s, I started to speak up again. And I went through this big circle of what is my voice? What do I want to say? My opinions and thoughts have changed and refined over the way, but my voice has always remained somewhat the same. And I'm really excited to talk to our guest today. We have Frankie Picasso coming from Toronto. We have Linda Franklin in New York. I've led my lovely co-host, Linda Kreter, in Washington, D.C., or outside of Washington, D.C. And I am your host for today, Sandra Beck, for this roundtable party of four. And without further ado, I'm going to go to Frankie Picasso first in Toronto and ask you, Frankie, how has your voice changed over the years from the time you were a little girl to where you are today?
Great question. Thanks for starting with me. I think my voice is the same. I really do believe that, what I speak about and what's important to me has remained the same. I don't struggle with it the same as I used to. It's not as opinionated and harsh. It's more mellow. I know how to talk to people better. I can negotiate better, compromise, easier than before. Before it was, always a struggle. You're always, slamming a wall with your opinion. But now it's gentler. I can get my point across easier, make it and get what I want out of it, but in a different way. So I think it's more mellow, but good, stronger.
Now, do you find that you've gotten more clear about who you are as you've gotten older, and that's reflective in your voice?
Partially that. I think I'm less political and listen easier than I was. I wasn't willing to listen before. I just had my opinion, and that was it. I wasn't willing to listen to others and hear what they had to say. And now, it's easier for me to do that. And because I know who I am, I'm clear with my message. I'm clear with who I am. I don't need to do that anymore. I'm still going to have my opinions. And if you can sway them, great. But yeah, I have grown, obviously I've grown over time, but the issues that compel me are still the same issues.
We're going to go over to Linda Kreter in Washington. Linda, what do you have to add to the conversation?
I love the way you said that, Frankie. I agree with you that I'm much the same way in that my voice is the same. I have the opinions that I had, but I am far more comfortable in my own skin now. And so like you, I'm finding that it's less of a struggle to try and listen. I'm much less judgmental. I am eager to hear what other people's opinions are. In fact, I think there's a problem in this country right now where having a normal discussion is quite difficult because there are so many showstoppers. And so I love that we can talk about being able to voice our opinion without the hindrances that can be in the way. So I think women start to feel more empowered as you get older, as you are comfortable in your skin, and you have belief systems that really are you. So everything becomes congruent, in my opinion, as I have gotten older, and I'm really eager to hear about other people's opinions. So it makes me a better listener, as you mentioned too, Frankie.
Linda Franklin from New York.
Yes. here I am.
Yes, you are.
Well, I agree with some of it, and some of it I'm a little bit different. The things that were important to me in my 20s and 30s are certainly not important to me now. When I was in my 20s, I just sort of went along for the ride. At the end of my 20s into my 30s and 40s and 50s, I was a bull in a china shop. My opinions were out there, loud and clear. I come from a Wall Street background, so I had to have a big voice, or else I didn't get heard in an all-male environment. Now, I would say that I too have mellowed, although some might disagree, including my husband. But yes, I am. I will be less judgmental, and I will wait to hear what someone has to say, and actually listen and not have all of those voices going in my head while somebody else is talking. So, I've mellowed, and it's just an interesting process to watch yourself go through all these different time periods in your life and see if you've hopefully grown or not grown.
So when opinions are like Madeleine Albright has a great quote, and she talks about we should use opinions to start discussions and not end them. Mm-hmm. I know when I was much younger, I was very much the dominant force in the conversation, and I can't really identify when that changed or what changed in me, where I decided I would listen more and join in the conversation rather than dominate the conversation. Do you think that's just something that powerful women do? Because you guys are all really, really powerful women. And I find that having a voice doesn't always mean dominating the conversation. In fact, sometimes it's a well-placed word or a simple comment that can really turn the conversation around rather than dominating it. And so I'm going to go to Linda Kreter in Washington and ask about that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think as you grow older and as you get more mellow, as we have talked about, I believe that you're absolutely right. You realize that being the one that does all the talking doesn't allow you to draw others out as much as that, as you put it, well-placed word can do. And I think there's something so powerful and empowering about being the one that can keep a conversation going, to keep it on track, to draw people out, because inherently people are very interesting if we stop and listen. And I think that is part of learning how to communicate in a way that draws others out. It adds value to others. It makes them share more. And when people are more open, you get a more honest opinion from them. At least that's my experience.
Linda Franklin in New York.
As important as a voice is and as important as conversation is, I think it's much more important, and I think people pay much more attention to your actions than your words. So you could say the most wonderful words in the world, but if your actions contradict all those wonderful things that you're saying, I think it ends up in a zero-game loss. So, listen, do your thing, but be you, and sometimes you don't have to say a word, and your essence comes through and can sway people much more than anything that would come out of your mouth.
Frankie.
I agree with both Lindas, actually. Linda Franklin, just spoke about actions, and I think that your actions have to match your words, especially if you're a strong woman. But putting that well-placed word, I think it's important for women who have strong opinions and are leaders to play a facilitative role. And so you can sit back. You don't have to dominate the conversation, but that well-placed word that feels, to facilitate a conversation and to find out what people are thinking, really thinking, in order to, promote innovation or anything that needs to be said or done. Too many times people will hold on to their opinions because they're afraid to, go against the crowd. It's important in almost every area to find out who people are, what they're thinking in order to, bring about a commonality and a conversation that everybody can feel good about.
Well, I think, one of the things that I find is very difficult is when people I'm in a group of people, and this happens a lot, especially in California, which is very polarized. You've got very, very kind of Democratic areas, very, very Republican areas, very, very Christian areas, very, very Jewish areas, very, very, I don't believe in anything and anything goes, like, kind of the West Hollywood free spirit. And people are very, very polarized, or they're very, very set about their point of view. And it's really hard when what someone is talking about just goes against everything, every grain in my being, everything I do, everything I say, everything I stand for. That's when I run into trouble. And Linda Franklin, have you ever run into that problem?
Yes, I have absolutely run into that problem, and I think it depends on the group that you're dealing with. I do this military charity, and some of the women, sometimes when they come back, their thinking is sort of just counteracting all the things that they want to do. So what do? You can't beat them over the head with a stick. So you listen, and then I think gently you offer some kind of conversation, and then you have to let it go, because sometimes when you're giving, I'll use the word advice, again and again, and then people are not really taking it in, I think that you get discouraged. So, instead of banging them over the head, sometimes you just have to just say, in time it'll happen, and just let it go.
Frankie Picasso, you love when this happens. How come?
I really do. It's a really great opportunity to listen when people are really polarized in their position, and they have, so much passion about it. It's fun and interesting to listen to what they have to say. And Edward de Bono, Father Creativity, I'll be quick here, I think you're going to break. He has this game he calls Six Hats, and you have to argue for or against a position, depending on the color of hat that you wear. So it's fun to kind of take that position. If I'm like totally polarized against, what they're saying, how could I stand in their shoes and be for it? What arguments could I help make towards that? And then, pass that torch over to them and say, okay, now just take it from my point of view. If you were me, like, how could you, what arguments could you make against how you feel, and why would they be valid? And that's really interesting to do.
It is. I need to take us to commercial break, and we're going to talk more about how we can use opinions to start discussions and not end them. Thank you, Madeleine Albright, for that wonderful quote. And we will be back after the break with more from Linda Franklin, Linda Kreter, Frankie Picasso, and myself, Sandra Beck. We'll talk to you after the break.
We're Dynamic Women Talk Radio, and we'll return after these short messages.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
Did you know that the average teenager drinks twice as much soda as milk? Since 1983, sugar consumption in the U.S. is up 28%. Why is that? There are several reasons, but one of the most common is soft drinks. 20-ounce beverages have become the norm, and it's not surprising to find that 43% of our sugar comes from drinks. Sugar is blamed for poor nutritional diets. USDA data shows that people whose diets are high in added sugar eat less calcium, fiber, iron, protein, and many other important nutrients. Fat-free foods are also a culprit. Since sugar is fat-free, many people tend to think it's okay to eat as much as they want. Remember that just because a food is fat-free does not mean that it's calorie-free also. For the Fitness Minute, I'm Annette Hammond.
Have you ever met one of those people who just can't be stopped? It's like they're unstoppable.
Yeah, I have.
Me too. What's their mystique?
Nothing stops these people.
Don't stop.
Each week, join Coach Frankie Picasso for Mission Unstoppable, where you'll meet some of the most amazing people.
Stop. Don't stop.
They've accomplished their goals despite insurmountable odds. They beat adversity, physical hardship, and traumatic events, and emerged triumphantly. They're people just like you and me, and they're winners. Are you unstoppable? Join Frankie Picasso every week for Mission Unstoppable and learn how.
Stop.
Hi, ladies. This is Sandra Beck, and we're here with Linda Franklin, Linda Kreter, Frankie Picasso, and we are talking about voice. And we are using our voices today to start discussions, not end them. We don't claim to be the end-all, be-all, and we're really just opening up. I know I get my eyes opened by these wonderful ladies. They always teach me something and give me a different way to look at things, which is so important when we're having conversations. And I'd like you guys to imagine we're all sitting around a dinner table, maybe at a swanky restaurant in New York City or a fancy posh place in Toronto, where our guests are from, along with Washington, D.C. And we're going to talk today about our voices. And Linda Franklin, you came up with a great comment about how our voices change when we speak to men or women. And I would love for you to have your take on that, especially for somebody who's had so much experience in Wall Street, really in a male-dominated world for many years.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of male energy, and because I've been around men so long, learning to be around women after I left Wall Street was difficult for me because women tend to do a whole lot more talking than men, and sometimes to pull out the actual thing that they're saying is painful because, you know, there's 20 minutes of conversation before they actually get to the point, and I had to learn to be more patient with that. I think men feel that way too. Women are always yakking, just, you know, tell me what you want and let's get to it. And I find that still true. I think men, most men, not all men, but I think most men like to just hear what you have to say without all of the, you know, stories and feelings attached to it.
Linda Kreter.
You know, I find that very fascinating because if you're talking to a strong man with a strong woman, I think you can have a very energized, dynamic conversation, and both parties enjoy it very much. I do find, as you did, I was in a very male-dominated industry in the pharmaceutical field for many years, and I found that I did have to temper my voice because the last thing you want to do is to be threatening to someone who has some meaning in your business sense. And so I think women are very good at being comfortable chameleons at times, doing the small nuances that change in giving a message to someone, allowing the voice to come forward. I don't think that's any different when you're dealing with women who are maybe threatened by a voice as well, because men and women communicate differently, which to me is clearer to be able to know how to behave with a man, because I think that they do communicate in a very black and white environment. And I've always had wonderful male friends who set me straight, talk directly, and so I'm very comfortable speaking that way. I find I'm more uncomfortable with women who are threatened because I can't figure out why they're threatened. And so I do think it's a very interesting way that we do modify for whomever we are talking so that we bring out the best and we keep the conversation going. I loved what Frankie said earlier about talking persuasively to one another and taking the other side. We, at one time in high school, were taught debate class where you were arguing or persuading off one side of a topic, and then you literally switched sides of the room and gave it from the other side. And it was with boys and girls, and it didn't make any difference, but it was wonderfully powerful in teaching you the value of listening, using persuasive speech, and being able to adapt to what your goals were in the conversation. So I love this discussion in all its entirety.
Frankie Picasso out of Toronto, you have an interesting opinion. You'd rather sit next to someone with the wrong opinion than no opinion at all.
Yes, I would. You know, it's very difficult to get to know somebody who doesn't have an opinion about anything. You know, it's not, I don't know if they're wishy-washy or if they're afraid to have a voice or afraid to have a thought, but I definitely, you can definitely engage easier with somebody who, you know, has a belief. They believe in something, and I'm all about beliefs and having, you know, values and believing in those values as a coach, as a woman. I loved what you said about the debate club, because I think that's really great, Linda. And, you know, having a voice, I think that we change our voice, not just male, female, but depending upon the the kind of personality somebody has.
Mm-hmm.
We will change our voice to appeal to that personality, especially like in a business like sales, just somebody who has a big ego. Let's say we're going to approach them differently than somebody who wants to buy something, let's say, based on price and value. We have to talk to people differently anyway. And as you engage, and go through your life, you learn to talk to different personality types in a different
Mm-hmm.
way. You can't be aggressive. Sandra, you and I could be really aggressive. and we love that. But somebody else, I'm not going to be that way with another woman. I don't need to be. I mean, we have fun with it, but I'm going to be gentler or not come on as strong with my opinions. Sit back and hear what your opinions are. Just because they're a human being, and you got to get to know them, and not everybody appreciates a strong personality. Let's say. I worked in kickboxing and boxing for many years. That was my field. So I worked with men who kick people's asses, but I wasn't a toughie. You know what? They still wanted a mom. They still wanted a woman to be soft and be there and tell their problems to, and then say, "Get out there, boy, and do your best. Let's go." They wanted a cheerleader, and you can be everything and all of it. You don't have to just be one, because we're women. We're able to do that. That's what's so great about us.
Now, Linda Franklin, what did you find out? Frankie's kicking ass over there with men and using two different speeds. What did you find in your business on Wall Street?
Well, you had to speak up, because if you didn't, you'd be you're toast. And I worked in the trading department. I ran the trading department, and my job was to pull the trigger, put the positions on the sheet, and take them off. And if I wasn't tough on the people doing that, that was before all these fancy machines where you just push a button. There was actually people down on the floor executing your orders. And my boss used to tell me, "What do you want to be, the lion or the lion tamer?" And so you really have to be tough. But on the other side, if somebody in the office was not feeling well, I would run and get them tea and make sure that they had aspirin and all of that thing. So it's a very gentle mix. But I think that the most important thing that we have to discuss is having a voice at all. There's so many women that have been taught not to have a voice, and then when they get into the business world, they don't think their opinions count. They're in meetings and they don't speak up, and therefore they get passed over. So I think it's really important, especially for the younger generation, because I still see it, that they have to speak up. They have to have a voice. They don't have to blend into the background. So how do we do that to assure women that it's okay to have a voice, it's okay to have an opinion, and that you matter enough for people to listen?
See, I think that's really interesting about that, matter enough to people to listen and being able to speak up. I think, when I'm in a room with, and I'm just going to go on this tangent here, because when I'm in a room with very tall men, really tall, and I'm talking like over 6 feet, well over 6 feet, I have to put my head up to listen. I have to sit up taller to look them in the eye. But normally when I'm out in public and if I wear just even regular heels, I'm 6 feet tall. And it puts you on like eye to eye level with people. And it's always easier for me to speak up to somebody, especially if it's a man, if I'm his height or pretty close to his height. And I'm interested just because all three of you are such powerful women, and you guys are little peanuts. You guys are like 100 pounds soaking wet, and I'm Blondzilla over here. I think I'm 8 inches taller than the tallest in the group. And I wonder what role that plays, like in making eye contact and speaking up. Do you think that as women we have to work harder to keep on par, especially in a conversation with a man, than we do with a woman? I'm just curious. I'm going to go to Linda Kreter first.
I'm just laughing when you talked about our heights, because I didn't know I was short until I got into business. I'm 5 feet tall. I never even considered myself short. I've been told I take up a lot of space for a small person. And I think it's because I've always had opinions and been very open and accessible to talking to others. And I've never met much to the chagrin of my children. But I've not found that to be difficult because everyone's taller than I am. So I find that in some ways I feel it gives me an advantage because others then feel that they have an inherited advantage because they're taller. And I kind of smile inwardly because as long as you're able to express yourself, we're fine. But otherwise, I may surprise you because I do have opinions and I'm not afraid to say them, and I do temper them, as we've talked about being a conversational chameleon in the right way in order to draw people out the most, because I like to keep conversations going. I don't like it when they get shut down. So I endeavor to do that as much as possible.
Frankie Picasso from Toronto.
I don't think being short is, you've heard of Napoleon, right?
Right.
It's my Napoleonic complex. Short people do a lot of stuff. I've never felt intimidated by a man being taller or bigger. It doesn't play into anything, although on their end, I think that, like you said, Linda Kreter, they assume something about you that's not necessarily true. Mm-hmm. Weaker or she's so tiny. She's like a mouse. She can't do anything. But we do have a voice, and that has absolutely nothing to do with body size. Yeah. But it's interesting, Sandra. Being 8 inches taller and walking through the world that way. I mean, my children now come and pat me on the head. It's okay, Mom. That's demeaning to me.
Wow. Okay, so I'm going to take us to commercial break. We're visiting today with Frankie Picasso from Toronto. We're visiting with Linda Kreter out of Washington, D.C., and Linda Franklin in New York City. We're talking about voice, and we're using our opinions today to start discussions, not end them. And it's our fervent hope that today when you go home or you're talking about things with your friends or your girlfriends or your coworkers, that you bring up some of these topics, put them out on the table, create communication, facilitate these conversations, because one of the things that dynamic women do best is that we support each other, we validate each other, we encourage each other. And I know I personally learn more from the women who oppose me sometimes than the women who agree with me. So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about energy. We're going to talk about how we can use our feminine, powerful energy in the world. We'll be back after the break.
We're Dynamic Women Talk Radio, and we'll return after these short messages.
Known for a long time that diamonds are precious or worth a lot of doodle-roomas. That means money. Did you ever wonder how a polished pebble becomes one of the most expensive things on earth? 2 centuries ago, diamonds were worn only by royalty. But in 1870, miners discovered huge deposits of diamonds in South Africa. And soon after, the diamond market was flooded. That's when a man named Cecil Rhodes started buying up shares of the diamond mines. 18 years later, Rhodes controlled the entire South African supply of diamonds. He started his own newspaper and magazine articles with clever ad campaigns about cut, clarity, color, and carat. He also convinced women that they weren't truly engaged to be married without a diamond ring. I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
It's easy to fall into the same old routine, whether you're at your desk or working out in the gym. When it comes to exercise especially, it's important to stay challenged and to switch it up. Not only is it good for you mentally, it's also beneficial to your body. Cooper Aerobic Center recommends that you don't stick to the same beat. While it's important to keep your overall exercise schedule consistent, you don't have to do the same workouts each time. Try different machines or classes to switch things up. They say that if you're not feeling a challenge, up your intensity level. Your ultimate goal is to reach a high intensity level of exercise while remaining safe. That is good advice and a useful reminder to change things up in your workout to achieve the best results. For the Fitness Minute, I'm Annette Hammond.
Hi, ladies. This is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with Linda Franklin, Linda Kreter, Frankie Picasso, and we are talking about voice and using our voices to start discussions. And I'm going to open the roundtable discussion with our party of four today, talking about energy. And energy is such a big word these days. We hear about the universe is changing, the world is changing, energy is shifting, masculine energy, feminine energy, energy, and energy drinks, like you name it. You can't swing a dead cat around without hitting the word energy. And so I'm going to go to Frankie Picasso in Toronto and talk to you a little bit about energy, especially feminine energy.
Yeah, well, here's a little story about feminine energy, tiny feminine energy. Last night in my house, I had 3 dogs. There was a huge German Shepherd Husky. There was my Golden Retriever. Both of these dogs are well over 100 pounds. And her name really is Peanut. She's a Chihuahua, and she's 5 pounds. When she was in the house when these 2 dogs walked in, and she ruled the roost. Like, these dogs, like, they're both male, and whatever, she's like, stay away, don't come near me. And she made them both fear her with her little body of energy. And it was so great to watch because they all thought, hey, I'm big and bad. And then she stands up and she's like, you're not. And it was all energy. These dogs knew that her energy was stay away. But for the longest time, my dog was afraid of her. And now, like, he's not as afraid of her because she comes around a little bit more. But the other dog who is usually attacks everything, didn't even bother with her, was afraid to look at her. And that's energy. So it doesn't matter how big you are. It's how you walk in the world with confidence. When you walk in with that confidence, that energy is radiating and it attracts people to you or it repels people from you. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you can learn, to work with. And size has nothing to do with that. That's just energy.
Linda Franklin in New York.
Hi. Energy, that's very, very important. And I think, the more that you progress through the world as you get older, you get to read people's energy more accurately, and you learn to stay away from the people that are just sending out all this negativity and sucking out your air. And when you're younger, you kind of don't pay as much attention to that. And even though a person might be making you feel very uncomfortable, you kind of stick with it. As you get older, you just say, no, it's not worth it. My time is more valuable than that. And I think it's a very important lesson, especially for women who always want to be nice and always want to say yes. I think it's very important for them to know where to put their energy so that they're getting the biggest benefit for themselves and for other people, and not just spreading it overall to everybody who don't appreciate it.
Frankie.
Yes.
You go. I know you have something to say. Okay.
I was thinking about, if we aren't nice, are we a bitch? Like, where's the happy medium for women? Women who are strong, women who have a voice, women who want to say things. Like, I agree with Linda about energy, and you do learn to read energy a lot better as you get older. And, this is why young women get into trouble because, they know something's wrong. They feel it, but they're afraid to make a wave. They're afraid to, go against the group. As you get older, you feel that energy, you walk in a room and you go, okay. And you can actually, almost pinpoint to the person who's radiating that negative energy. And you can change the energy. You can do that. But let's talk about, being a bitch, and let's talk about, how men will and women will come at you, will attack you for being strong or for having an opinion. And it doesn't really mean that you're a bitch. I mean, you don't have to be bitchy. You can be nice, but strong. But you're going to get labeled with it at some point, I believe, in your career.
Linda Franklin first, then Linda Kreter next.
Yes, well, a lot of women do get called bitches, but who cares? I mean, if you're really confident in yourself and you know that you're doing right and you're treating people right, and you might not be, giving them love and kisses every day, but you're being fair and you're being responsible, then let them call you whatever they want to call you. You've got to feel good about yourself. And if you're backing down because you're afraid someone's going to call you a bitch, then you're just not being true to yourself, and I don't think that's the way to go.
Linda Kreter.
I agree. I've always been me, And I can read faces a lot better than I used to. And I think that was one of the hardest things. We talk about voice, but I think for me, the hardest part is controlling my facial expressions. I could never play poker professionally. That would never work. Because I think it tells so much more. And when you see a stormy face, no matter male or female, I think that I have a propensity then to want to change the energy, as Frankie was saying earlier. So we learn to read. We learn to stay away from toxic people to a certain degree, or to try and to change that energy. But I've also learned over time, I'm not going to change some of this energy because it is not worth spending my energy on it. So if we're influenced by the 5 people around the most, if I'm around a toxic person, they will be put at arm's length in my life because I don't have room for that anymore. And I'm who I am at this point, and I'm comfortable with that. And as long as I can keep my values and express myself in a way that I'm comfortable with and proud of, then I'm okay. I have an audience of 1, and that's where I stand on that. So how do you guys feel about facial expressions and things like that? Because I think that was the hardest part for me.
See, I love it because I can stand there and look dumb as a stump. You know, I can really perfect it. No, I can do it. I can.
Did you practice it in a mirror?
Yes.
I actually have a neutral face. I do.
I have my dumb as a stump face, and I like to put it on with parties. And when I've got my, sexy dress on and my big blonde hair and my high heels, and I just wander around because I find it takes people off guard. And when I stand there dumb as a stump, they'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And then I like to listen, get the lay of the land, find where is my opening to come in and really, change a perception or influence someone. And I just wanted to comment really quick about the bitch label. When somebody says I'm a real bitch, I love it because that means I got to them. I got to them at some level. Now, they may not like it, which is why they called me a name, but I know they're going to go home and think about it. They're going to go home and talk to their mom and their sisters and their friends. And yeah, maybe I didn't influence them in the way that I initially intended to. And yeah, they maybe called me a name, but that's not a bad thing because that's how we reach someone. When we strike somebody's chord, people don't like that. I don't like when people pluck my chords, but I don't turn around and call them a name. I actually look and go, wow, I really got to think about this because this is really bothering me. And why is it bothering me? That's what an introspective person does. But it's really fun to be called a name if you think about what it means. It means that you really struck a chord with someone and probably something that they needed to anyway, because you weren't like walking out in the universe going, I'm going to be a bitch today. You're just being yourself, doing what you're doing. And it's that emotion that women have that do drive me bananas. I'll be honest. I'm a woman. I don't know how many emotions I have. I think I'm like a 4-speed car. I kind of seem to have 4. I have the full range that most women do, and it's puzzling to me when I make people cry. So it's I don't know how to deal sometimes with women's emotions, and I am a woman. And one of the things that I like about all 4 of you, I'm just going to say this on record, is I can completely be myself. I can speak freely and openly, and I have not yet made any of you cry. So that's a good thing. Because when you are yourself and you're yourself like I am myself, it's very hard to maneuver in the world when you're making people cry or you're hurting people's feelings or you just feel like you're steamrolling over people sometimes. But I'm made the way I'm made, and I don't know how to be any other way. I've tried for many years to be different, and it didn't work. So I'm going to go to Linda Franklin.
Well, that's very interesting about the crying thing. I mean, because in business, if a woman, because we are emotional, gets so worked up that she cries in the office, oh my God, that's like weakness. That doesn't play in Peoria. I remember one time in the trading room, I was so frustrated, I did not cry. I threw a pencil at one of the guys, and then I walked out and I went into the bathroom and I cried, but I didn't cry in front of them. And I think it was out of frustration and anger. It wasn't out of anything else. But, I mean, men, maybe it's a little bit different today, but I don't think so. I don't think that crying in the office is probably a very good thing.
I just make them cry at restaurants, dinner parties, kids' soccer games. I have that unique ability to influence people to tears. So, Frankie.
I can't remember ever making anybody cry. That's kind of interesting. But, I understand about women crying because men are taught not to cry. Right? Our little boys have said, no, you're not going to cry. And so they have learned to channel that somehow into something else, right? But we women we're taught to express our emotions, most of us. And so those tears are tears of frustration, like you said, Linda. They're tears that there's waterworks on because, I want you to feel sorry for me. It's just, I don't know where the steam's going to come out. So they're going to come out through my eyes, unless I'm going to punch a wall. Which, wouldn't be very good. So men are it's funny because it's actually a flip. Like we're telling men start to cry now. Our little boys should learn to cry. But women have been taught to cry and not to do something else. And so, how do we turn that? How are they to channel that frustration when those tears are coming? And they are just frustration. It doesn't mean, I'm emotional or I'm out of control or anything like that guys will turn around and point the finger at you for. It really just means, okay, my emotions are heightened, but, I'm frustrated. So where can I take this?
Linda Franklin, we've got a quick quote from you before we go to commercial break.
Well, it's just really funny. Women love when men cry. They think it's a weakness, but we see it as a strength.
I don't either.
I don't.
So I don't
either.
No, you know what we're going to talk about after the break. So Linda Franklin said we love when men cry. We're going to come back after the break with Linda Franklin, Frankie Picasso, and Linda Kreter, and we are going to talk about emotions and showing emotions. And do we love when men cry or do we not love when men cry? And what is it okay for them to cry about? So these are really hot button questions, and we hope we don't make our producer, Eric Anderson, today, who's on a holiday recording our show, cry. And we thank you, Eric, for being here today for us. We'll be back after the break.
We're Dynamic Women Talk Radio, and we'll return after these short messages.
Heard about Mel and Joy Schwanke, a Nebraska couple that have worn matching outfits for the last 35 years? Apparently, they have over 140 matching outfits, all custom made, which typically match her dress with his tie. The couple is a match made in heaven. Neither one of them can remember the exact date they started this quirky tradition, but they both contend it's one of the elements that have held their marriage together an impressive 65 years. What do you call a marriage between well-matched people? Nomogamosis. Mr. and Mrs. Schwanke say that Velcro connects them because they do everything together. If you like doting on your wife with excessive fondness, you would be uxorious. And a woman who is excessively devoted to her husband is meritorious. I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
It's the Fitness Minute with fitness expert Annette Hammond.
100 years ago, only about 10% of adults were overweight. But today, an estimated 61% of Americans are overweight. Yet we have the same genes as our ancestors. What's changed isn't our genes, but our lifestyle. Our lives have become more sedentary, and our daily activity level has decreased for the days of our past relatives. We have loads of unhealthy processed food and easily accessed fast food. Ultimately, your behavior determines the number on the scale. If you choose healthy, low-calorie food and exercise, you can lose weight or maintain your present weight. Choose the right behaviors and reap the rewards of a healthy lifestyle. Stay active, eat light, nutritious food, and watch your health increase as your weight decreases. For the Fitness Minute, I'm Annette Hammond.
Hey, ladies, this is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with Linda Kreter, Linda Franklin, and Frankie Picasso, and this is our party of four. We are talking today about emotions, and emotions that come not only through our voice, but squirt out our eyeballs. And Linda Franklin had a great comment at the end of the last segment, which was, women love men who cry. And I'm going to just buzz in and go, I think men crying comes with a lot of rules and restrictions, because when a man's a crybaby, I just can't take it. I'm like, oh God, are you crying again? Just suck it up, will you? And that's what's running through my head. But then if I've got a really tough man, like both of my brothers, I think I've only saw them get teary-eyed like at my mom's funeral, and then maybe 2 or 3 times other in my life. And now granted, these are the brothers that would punch me when I cry. So I wouldn't say we're the most emotionally engaged engineering family, but it really is conditional. And Linda, I'm going to go to you first, Linda Franklin.
Well, I agree. I mean, I wouldn't want some guy going around weeping all the time. That would be just a little bit too much for me to handle. But when there is a deep emotional tug at somebody's heart, I think it's really nice to see a tear come out of a man. I mean, you'll notice when men are around men, they're talking about such superficial things. It's either business or it's sports or it's, I don't know, boats or whatever they're turning them on. But it's never like deep. Women are much deeper when they have their conversations. So it's really nice if you're having a conversation with a man that he really is taking into his heart, to see a little tear in the eye, to know that you're reaching beyond that tough surface.
Okay, a little tear in the eye. All right.
Tear in the eye, yeah.
Go ahead, Frankie.
Yeah, a little tear in the eye is okay. But I've had boyfriends who like turn the waterworks on, like,
yes,
please don't leave me. I don't, like, to me, like, that's just so unmasculine, and like, go away, like, you're really bugging me now. And it's terrible to say, because, like, they should have emotions. I have sons. Yes, I want you to feel things, but I don't want you to cry. I mean, if my dad cried once in his life that I know of, like, okay, great. My husband, he might have a tear at an animal movie or something, but he's not crying. It's not crying like like that, right? It's not like that kind of crying. I couldn't put up with it. Like, I would just feel he's weak. I would feel weakness. I wouldn't have respect anymore. And it's terrible to say, but that's how it is.
Linda Kreter.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm following on Frankie's comment so closely, because I find it very touching when a man is able to show tenderness because of a close emotion, that kind of thing, where it feels like it matches the words and the situation at hand. But I've also known multiple men who use tears and weeping as a tool for manipulation. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to realize that it happens more than once, and that is not okay with me. And I don't like being manipulated through a use of emotions and tears, where that's the way. In fact, I'm not tolerant of it anymore at all. If I see it, it's we're done.
It's a flag.
And I'm out of here. It's a huge flag. And it's happened more than once. And so you learn, because women do learn. So tears are fine when it is congruent with the situation. To me, it's not if it's a pattern for manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well,
Linda Franklin, you want to tag on to that? You said as long as it's genuine and not a way to get what you want or make you feel guilty.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with the women. I mean, if it's genuine, I mean, if someone was walking around sobbing all the time, or that was the way that they got you to do what you wanted, so you would feel guilty. I mean, all that would do is build up a terrible resentment, and it would be for no good. But on those tender moments, I think it's lovely, but certainly not as a manipulation.
Or it sends up a big flag, and I'm going to tell you, because, when you're single like I am and you're dating, and, yes, I run a company. I have 2 kids that are small, and I have my 83-year-old dad, so I'm pretty tough. I think I'm pretty tough in fighting through my life. So if I go out to dinner with you and you get, like, you start like getting teared up over every little thing. It's like what goes in my head, right or wrong, is, oh my God, what a train wreck. You're a basket case. Like, suck it up, man. It's just, it's not a dead puppy on the side of the road. It's just a conversation. And so it's hard for me to explain, especially to my kids, because I do tell my kids to suck it up. I'm like, guys, you can't cry over every little thing. They're 10 and 13, and you can get teary-eyed. But if you're falling apart and your girlfriend or your wife has to pick you up and reset you, like, that to me shows like they don't have any emotional fitness or emotional muscle. Because as we go through life, we have to have, a lot of us here on the show today, I won't say who, but have been through divorce. They've been through domestic violence. They've been through emotional abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, all these different whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we've all made it to a greater or lesser extent in a man's world. So emotional fitness is really part of what we look for in other people. Linda Kreter, emotional fitness. What do you think?
I had a wonderful friend who was also a counselor, and she was amazing. And she talked about energy outlay in a way that I think has stayed with me forever, and I've used it with many, many friends at the right situations. She said, take a look at the situation and what it calls for. Is this a lump in your oatmeal, a lump in your throat, or a lump in your breast? And then apply what you feel is appropriate to that. And I find that to be such a wonderful rule to follow, because then you aren't really misusing your energy and you're directing the right amount to the right things. At least it has worked for me.
Oh, love that. Lump.
I love that too.
Lumpy.
Isn't that
lumpy.
special?
Yeah,
it's a good visual, but it really does help guide your use of emotion.
Yeah, Frankie Picasso, Toronto.
Yeah, I really love that, Linda. I think that's the right way to channel emotion and to see it for, the right fit for the right circumstance. Like, you're not going to, I know that, Sandra, when your mom passed away, it was super emotional for you. Like, you obviously you feel that, but, you're not going to have that same thing to every little thing that, somebody ate all the bread. Oh my God.
Oh, you guys ate my Lindt chocolate. That's what my two kids and my dad did. You ate my Christmas Lindt chocolate. Though I will say that anger went right up through the roof. And I just wanted to talk a second about the connection between anger and frustration. And even though she's not billed on today's ticket, I'm going to pull Kathy Krafke. Are you still listening?
I am. I'm still here.
Okay, so Kathy Krafke has been our silent edition today and listening to the show, but I'm going to go to you because you had something that you wanted to say about anger and frustration, and I can't paraphrase it because I don't really understand it, so I'm just going to pull you on for a quick cameo.
Well, I love the comment about how, I think this is so true, that as women, we often cry because we're frustrated. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way that speaks to the fact that as young women, it's hard for us to learn to be assertive in a positive way, in a gentle but strong way. So frustration, tears sometimes for me became the marker that I needed in my heart to recognize that I was frustrated, which is really anger. And if I'm angry, I need to understand why I'm angry and what I need to do to change that. Because I really believe God gives us all our emotions, so many of them, we just don't know how to use them properly. But if we understand that they're beautiful, and even anger can be positive, then we become more effective. And I think that's been true for me. The less I internalize my frustration and the more I speak and act on what I know I need to change, then the less I have tears of frustration. But I think all women can relate to that. I was so happy that popped up in the conversation.
Well, and I think, one of the things that I want to talk about is, when I was a little girl, it was not welcome for the girls to get angry. The boys could get angry, but the girls, anger was not an emotion that nice girls showed. And I want to go just quickly around the table and ask you about demonstrating anger. And I'm going to start with Frankie Picasso. Demonstrating anger. How did you learn the socially acceptable way to present anger as a woman? Because it's not the same as a man. Go ahead.
You know what? My mom yelled. She was a yeller, and I didn't want to be a yeller because I didn't like it. And so I will leave. I'll slam a door. I'll drive my car really fast. I'll do dangerous things against myself when I'm angry. Like I'm a huge risk taker, and it'll channel when I'm angry.
Linda Franklin, anger.
Yeah, anger. I'm a yeller, so I'm not as much of a yeller now as I was when I was younger, but yeah, I was a yeller. I was a door slammer. I would take the New York City telephone book and slam it on the floor. I had to get it out because I'm like a radiator. I've got to let that steam out, and then I'm okay. And I think it's knowing who you are. My husband hated that. He was a sulker, and I was a yeller, so, you have to learn to temper it, but, and I have. But, yeah, I believe in getting it out, because keeping it inside is not a good thing.
Linda Kreter.
I completely agree with keeping it inside is not. For me, I learned that anger was a healthier emotion than being down or depressed. Mm-hmm. That was not a healthy emotion. And so when things in my life had not gone well, it was a bad time in my life, I realized that instead of being frustrated and not knowing what to do with it, which is sort of an inaction for me, that learning that this was indeed anger, it was okay. And I'm a lifelong sailboat sailor person. And so for me, I would describe if I'm angry, it's a squall. It blows right by. There's nothing left but sunshine afterward. But sometimes the squall has to happen, or else I'm going to just be a volcano. I'm using all these climactic words, but you know what I'm talking about. It's here and then it's gone. So it's healthy to relieve it, and it is a healthier emotion than being depressed.
Well, and I think this is so important, these topics that we talk about, and this is why Dynamic Women Talk Radio exists, so that we can talk about things, because I have had to learn as an adult how to express anger. I was a stuffer, I was an avoider, I was a distractor, all those things. So it's really wonderful for me to hear that these dynamic, powerful women express anger, and they're still loved, and they're still powerful, and they're still successful. These are things that we want to talk about. So I want to thank Frankie Picasso, Linda Franklin, Linda Kreter, and for myself, Sandra Beck. We'll be back next week where we can use more opinions to start discussions, not end them, for Dynamic Women Talk Radio.
Thank you for tuning in today to Dynamic Women Talk Radio, and join us each week. You can find more shows on dynamicwomentalkradio.com.